You know the best part about right now having to pretend that it is 2 weeks in the future?
Merry Christmas.
Well, that's the second best part. We are 2 weeks in the future from the Patreon debacle that has consumed us over the last week. Mm-hmm. Which we will not be discussing because it was 2 weeks ago and we have moved on beyond it now.
That's right. Just today, in fact.
I have an adult beverage helping me move on from it right now as we speak. Happy story. Actually, well, you may have some spoilers for this one, but there has been a story, actually a Christmas story, so this is thematic, that I have been meaning to tell for approximately 12 months.
Yes.
And the problem is this story came up at a time that was very chaotic for me. Mm-hmm. Because when this whole story started, it actually started just after Christmas, thanks to delays in the postal service last year. Mm-hmm. And just after Christmas was a time of great upheaval in the tiny angry household, where we both decided to quit our jobs overnight and run off to New York, and then both start completely new jobs. And then the year sort of snowballed from there.
Right. It's been nothing but uphill since.
I thought we were going to talk about a happy story.
Right. Happy story, sorry.
So, just after Christmas, I think it must have been the 26th or 27th, I received a mysterious letter in the mail.
Oh?
Yes, it was a very strange letter that came from someone named the Solicitor of Revels?
Okay.
They were a solicitor of some sort. This letter, and I should point out, it came by way of a clearinghouse in Canada. Okay, which a clearinghouse, a mass mailing house, generally used to conceal the origin of mail. And as I opened it, I immediately understood why. Because the letter explained that over the course of many years, there had been attempts by various government organizations, including those in France, to suppress and conceal a certain play. Basically, active government censorship to erase this play from existence. Mm-hmm. And there had been this organization that was dedicated to retaining the memory of the play, keeping the play alive. And I had been entrusted with 4 pages from the original screenplay, or not screenplay because it was a play, sorry, from the original script of this play. This was very mysterious.
Right. And we've already discussed how big a playgoer you are.
Well, well, what's really interesting was at the time there had been a lot of fights online about censorship and about freedom of speech and freedom of expression and stuff that I had been sort of vocal about. So as I was reading this letter, I started to wonder if maybe someone hadn't decided that I was a good person to help in this anti-censorship endeavor.
Huh.
But then as I looked at the sheets from the play itself, and it seemed odd that I would be sent just 4 incomplete sheets from this play. As I looked at them, and there's these old yellowed weathered pages, that seem to be fairly authentic, I noticed that the name of the play was The King in Yellow.
That seems familiar.
Right. Well, that's exactly what happened. Like, the only thing that happened in my brain is, that sounds familiar. I've heard of this play. But what with one thing and another going on, Didn't really have a substantial chance to look into it for a few days. And then it kind of, I left the pages there. I put everything back in the envelope. And I put it aside, I'm wondering. Then I started to think, is someone pranking me? Because I do have an online presence. So somebody's playing a joke on me or whatever. Or so fine, whatever. And I put the pages aside and it kind of slipped out of my mind. Until 2 weeks later, about 2 weeks later, when we're getting ready to go to New York during the aforementioned, there was some sudden changes in our work situation that necessitated us canceling a trip to New York, and we did not want to cancel this trip to New York. So instead, we decided that we would both collectively quit our jobs and go to New York instead of keeping our jobs, which was rather a gutsy decision. Tiny had gotten a new job offer at that point, but the new job offer required her to start training the week that we were supposed to be in New York for my birthday. And she was currently working at a retail establishment, and they weren't giving her much hours anyway. So in order to give proper 2 weeks notice, she would have had to basically give 2 weeks notice the day we got the news about the new job, and that would completely ruin the New York trip, and we wanted to go to New York. At the same time, I was working rather unhappily at a retail coffee chain who shall remain nameless.
Right, good.
Yeah, got it. Which had become an increasingly miserable job. And so I looked at her and I said, let's just go to New York tomorrow. And she said, what? And I said, look, I can do this. I moved the tickets around. It cost us a little bit extra money. And we each placed a call to our respective bosses and resigned then and there. So that was very exciting. So The next day, it was actually like 2 or 3 days later that we left for New York. And right as we're leaving for New York, I get the mail, and there's a strange envelope in the mail. I open it up, and inside the envelope, and I really don't have a chance to really look at it because we're about to, leave for a flight.
Right.
So I look at the envelope, and there's an old newspaper clipping about a performance of... it was a playbill. It was a playbill announcing an upcoming performance of a play, The King in Yellow, at the Strand Theater in, 1890-something. Which, obviously, I wasn't going to be able to attend the play because... I wasn't in Europe, and, it's more than a century and 20 years, a century and a score too late.
And it probably wasn't about Chicago anyway, so.
No, it was probably the original without the World's Fair angle built into it. But also what was very interesting was that there was a pendant inside. A very nicely made pendant on just a piece of black cord that I can only describe it as a weird symbol. It was just this metal weird symbol. I think it was pewter.
Okay.
So, and it was in a little black pouch. It was all very nicely done, and it was from the same clearinghouse. And now this is all just a little odd. So, because I don't really have time to look over everything, I grab it, and I grab the original envelope, and I put it all in my suitcase so that I can look over it at New York. And as I'm thinking it over, it starts to occur to me that I have a lot of fans and friends on social media, and that somebody is giving me an experience for the holidays or my birthday. Yeah. So now the interesting so I started, because I'm going home to visit my family for my birthday. I show them all this stuff. It's really cool because there's this story sort of unfolding in it about here we have this censored play that was being suppressed, and now all of a sudden, apart from this mysterious symbol, there's also about to be a performance of this play. Right? So this is a little story unfolding. So I show it off to my family, and I ask, hey, did you do this? Are are you setting this up? And there's very few people in my family with the overlap in interests that I have and the wherewithal to basically construct a role-playing game through the mail, which is what I've become convinced that it is. This is basically a role-playing experience through the mail.
Sure.
Right? And there's very few people in my family that that are capable of it. And I asked those two people, and both of them denied it. And I asked Tiny about it, and she also denied it. And so, then, I'm rolling it over in my head, and I know it's got to be someone who knows my address. And I'm very, very careful about who knows my address for obvious reasons. Or somebody who could have gotten my address. And there is only one weakness in my security, in my, privacy, my secrecy.
Right.
And she happened to be sitting next to me on the plane ride back. So in my head, I figured out a short list of 3 people who would have the wherewithal to do this, and who also Tiny would entrust with our address, because she knows that I'm very careful about who knows where, about our address at all. And so I asked her about the top name on the list. And, well, anyway, that's neither here nor there, the result of that questioning. Because we get home, and, we've now spent a week in New York, and she's starting her job, and when we get home, I think a few days after we got home, there was another package there.
Oh.
And it was substantial. I mean, it was packaged in a shipping box, but when we opened up the box, what was in there was an envelope and a wooden crate. A little wooden crate, about a foot long and 3 or 4 inches, high and wide and a foot long. Yeah, not even a foot. Yeah, no, about a foot. Doesn't, a little rectangular crate. But this is like an old-fashioned wooden crate, like the kind that the government would have put a tiny Ark of the Covenant in so that it could be studied by top men, that sort of little wooden crate. Okay. And there's an envelope, and I open up the envelope, and of course now at this point certain questions have been settled in my head about this whole thing, but I still can't help but getting really excited because now I want to know what's going on. And I open up, and unfortunately, there's newspaper clipping and a folded and faded and kind of bent postcard that had obviously been through a lot, and a few other little odds and ends, and they indicated that there had been a disaster. There had been a disastrous performance of this play, The King in Yellow, that had resulted in at least one death, and a stampede of people fleeing the theater, and a fire. And in the end, there was nothing left in the theater. They went through the whole theater and they could not find any sign of the people who had put it on or the script or anything else. The only thing they found in the basement was a statuette of this mysterious figure who was the titular figure in the play, The King in Yellow. But the statuette, shortly after the investigation, had vanished completely and no one knew where it turned up. And then there's the wooden crate. And now let me tell you, this was the funniest thing, because I do not own a crowbar. Well, no. I own a crowbar now. Okay? Because this was an old-fashioned wooden crate. It was nailed shut. And I had to go and get a little pry bar from the whatchamacallit, the little hardware store up the block, and come home and open it up. And inside, like the little straw and paper matting that filled it exactly like you would expect in that old crate, is the statuette that was described there. This strange statuette of a robed figure standing about 8 inches tall. Face is covered with a veil, and these old tattered robes and pointed shoulder things. And I can describe it very well because it is now sitting on my desk, rather centrally located as the point of pride in my desk. So there was this statuette, and then that was it. That was the end. I never got anything else about it. Never got anything else of it. I did start to get curious, though, because I only had a vague recollection of the name The King in Yellow. So I went and looked into that. And The King in Yellow is, well, it's not really a novel. It's a collection of short stories. Was published in 1895 by Robert Chambers. Yeah, I had to actually look this up because I've got it in front of me now. Okay, so it was Robert Chambers in 1895. And it's called The King in Yellow. And what it is a collection of several short stories. I think like 10, it says 10 short stories. And all the short stories are tied together by the motif of this mysterious play and the supernatural entity known as the King in Yellow and his mysterious symbol, the yellow sign. And of course, people who are huge fans of all the Cthulhu mythos stuff, they're yelling at me like, how could you possibly not know all of this? Because it was actually a sort of supernatural horror story in the vein of Cthulhu that predated. It was sort of the pre-Cthulhu era. And the basic story is about a play that drives anybody who reads it or performs it or is involved in it into despair or craziness or depression. The play itself has been like fraught with accidents, and it has indeed been suppressed because it kills people and drives them crazy. And the play is about this supernatural entity, the King in Yellow. So, and I did actually buy a copy of it, which is just another one of those books on the pile of things that I'm going to read, I swear. I did, though, in callback to last week's episode. Is it last week's episode? Yeah, I guess the fact that this is 2 weeks later doesn't change last week from being last week. Because that'll be released 2 weeks from last week, which will be a week from now, which will be a week ago. Right. I did actually pull out The Devil in the White City and start reading that.
Oh, good.
So I did not get far into it, but I did start reading it last night. So yeah, but it was such an amazing experience, and it was so weird at first. And you know what? In a sense, I'm kind of sad that I sort of figured out what was going on early on, and started grilling people about it. Because I would have, it was a really neat experience nonetheless. But like my instant skepticism and then immediately figuring out, oh, somebody's putting me through a game. It
Sure.
detracted a little bit from it, but not much. And to the person who was responsible, who I know for a fact is right now listening to this conversation. I do have to defend Tiny. She did not crack easily. And it was only because there had been an incident with our address leaking out to someone online that had been that had caused me some strife, that she immediately wanted to reassure me as to where our address had gone, that she answered so quickly. Yeah. So, I certainly wouldn't want you, sir, to blame Tiny for fingering you.
I happen to know there was a fourth mailing.
There was the fourth mailing, the one from the mysterious package company that explained it all.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Yeah, you're right. I didn't really include that in the story, but yes. So, sir, first of all, although I have said it several times already, I do want to say again, thank you for that. It was an amazing experience. And
Cool.
I wish it had come at a less chaotic time.
Yeah, well.
But it was very exciting nonetheless.
Cool.
And I mean, this is not, so there is a company, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a company called the Mysterious Package Company. And they have a number of experiences to choose from. I mean, you've got the King in Yellow thing. You've got, which is a 4 mailing deal, including the last one. Mm-hmm. There are other shorter experiences and also longer experiences. Short ones can be 1 mailing, maybe 2. Longer ones can, I think they've got one that's like up to 6 mailings at this point. But there's things like finding a pirate treasure and reading a diary of somebody who disappeared, and all kinds of things in between, time travel, and all kinds of stuff, various experiences that you can have. It was one of those things where it came across my desk that there was the possibility to send an experience to somebody, and it sounded like a really cool idea. And I thought, who do I know that deserves one of these experiences? And the answer was you. It was pretty good.
Which I still say I am not sure that I deserve it, and I'm very flattered that you chose me of all people. It was unnecessary, but it was delightful. And let me tell you, both the pendant, which I had taken to wearing for a while.
Yes. Just in case.
Well, I wore it throughout the entire holiday, but now I do have it hung up in my bedroom.
Cool.
Rather than wearing it. And as I said, the statuette is sitting on my desk in a place of pride. They're both really high quality stuff.
Yes. Yeah. That's the thing. These are not cheap experiences in either sense of the word. So you have to pick your victim carefully, because it has to be somebody who will appreciate what is happening, and kind of roll with it a little bit just to have the fun of it, rather than somebody who instantly becomes paranoid and begins cross-examining everybody they ever meet.
To be fair, I limited my cross-examination to a short list of 2 people and 1 person I know who I could crack.
Right. Yeah, no, that's fine. No, see, that is part of the fun, though, is trying to figure out where it's coming from and who's making it happen and that kind of stuff. That's fine. That's not I don't.
No.
Even if Tiny had just fessed up on the first day and said, "Oh, by the way, Brian is doing this thing."
No, she held out until the plane ride back to Chicago. When I actually started needling her, and I'm like, there's just one thing that bothers me about all this. Somebody got our address, and I can't figure out who, because only our family has the address. You don't know how that could have happened, do you? And then she's looking out the window at the clouds, and I'm like, huh.
She didn't immediately pretend to be asleep or anything like that.
Not that I care. I'm sure it's someone we trust. I just really like to know where, where our address is out in the wild.
Mm-hmm. It's very subtle, Mr. Perot.
You have to use the right tool for the job.
Yeah. And you were very good about not letting me know that you knew until after everything was done.
Well, see, that was the funny thing, too, is like, I told you about it after the first arrival. I'm like,
yes.
I got the weirdest thing in the mail. And I was actually like, you got to see the whole progression, I think, through Twitter direct messages.
Yes.
Of me going from, could this be real? Why would somebody do this? Well, maybe it's because this can't be. This has got to be something. It's a prank or a game, or there's a company that's doing this or something. But who would do this? So you get to see that whole progression as I.
Yes.
And then shortly after I hit New York is when I told you about the second one. I'm like, I got the second one. And at that point, pretty much that was when you were on the short list of like I said, there's 3 people out on the internet who I knew Tiny would trust with our address, who who are who are friends. Oh my God, that word hurts saying it. Who are friends who would do something like this.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, the demeanor that I have on the internet means that there's not a lot of people out there who want to give me presents.
It's weird. I don't understand that.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Unless by presents you mean punches. There's plenty of those.
The fun part is the company would email me to say the next package is on its way. And because I knew you'd been having trouble with your mail getting delivered at the time,
yeah,
I would immediately jump on and tell Tiny that it's coming. Look out for it.
She knew that they were coming?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
she knew exactly when they were coming.
Okay, then she kept secrets better than I thought.
Yes.
Because she was very surprised. Or at least seemed to be.
Uh-huh.
So, no, it was really an amazing experience, though. It was definitely the highlight of the year. Which,
cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad it made your holidays somewhat better for you.
It was all my family talked about for a while. We're sitting around the table. I'm like, look at this. What do you think this is? This is so weird. And they're like, what's the King in Yellow? And I'm like, it's a play from a book. I looked it up. It's what, you don't know 1895? 1890s horror.
Yeah.
So
what's wrong with you? You don't know these references,
right?
Oh man.
But it's kind of a funny thing. I'm actually gonna confess to weird thoughts that I sometimes have.
Uh-oh.
Okay. No, okay. They're not anything uncomfortable. This is the sort of thing I can only tell a friend who would send me a statuette of the mysterious supernatural king. You know. When I was young, I was the kid in every group who invents games for their friends. Right. You know what I mean? Like, oh, we're all in the pool. Let's do this is our game now. And they, when I was young, when I was about 8, 9, 10 years old, it was more or less customary for your parents to not care where you were until dinner time, as long as you left them alone.
Right.
So we would just go wandering the neighborhood, and I was frequently inventing things like treasure hunts, and without really knowing it, even in those years, I guess I was about 10 or 12 at the time. So it was right around the time I was getting into Dungeons and Dragons. So I was already basically being a game master. I was running LARPs, basically. Where I would get up early in the morning and take my bike, and I would go like hide clues and things around, at different locations in the neighborhood, like under the bleachers at the school and in the little wooded lot that we used to explore and all that stuff, and then send my friends on these quests, and they loved it. And I would follow around and, give them clues and be different characters and stuff. And I have gotten this urge of late to invent a scenario of like, I don't know, like, something that you could do online easily, where like if you go to a certain website, you get a message from someone to someone else, and sort of like you're invading on a story that's happening.
Right.
Or like you like leave stuff around and ultimately leave it to have it lead to some sort of treasure or item or whatever, and just like whatever the incitement is for the story, whatever the first thing is, like a CD that has a video on it of a transmission from 2 people who are obviously spies or something like that, and just leave that somewhere. And just build the whole rest of the experience. And just assume someone goes through it.
There is a thing that sometimes companies will do, which is very much like that. They set up an experience, maybe you get a message in the mail, or maybe you get a thumb drive with some data on it, or something like that, that then sends you on what is, to a greater or lesser degree, like a scavenger hunt almost.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly
go,
what I'm talking about here.
Yeah, you go out
Scavenger
and
hunt with a plot.
Yeah, exactly. and so everything is, is leading up to stuff. I'm trying to think of the name of what is probably the most famous one, so naturally I can't remember it. But it basically amounted to you submitting your phone number to a website.
Mm-hmm.
And then essentially forgetting you had done that.
Which is...
And months and months later, you would get a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And the game was on. You would hear a conversation or or somebody would give you specific instructions or something, along those lines.
Right.
And then you would either get, you would either follow the instructions or you would puzzle out the conversation you'd be hearing. And that might lead you to a website which would have further instructions that lead you to email something to somebody, or
you go to
whatever.
a location and there's like a QR code on something,
right,
and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, lots of stuff like that. So it's not unheard of, and it's
okay. So I'm not crazy.
No, you're not crazy. It would be interesting to see one on theme for a bunch of actual role players. That I think would be fun, but I don't know how the logistics would work out. So you'd be on your own with that.
Yeah, well, see, like, my thought is I'm almost tempted to just, like, leave the thing that starts it all, like the thumb drive or whatever, somewhere, and just assume that they go through it.
Right. Just walk away from it and assume it's all being done at some point.
Exactly. And maybe at the end, like, there's a message that gets back to me or something like that. Just it's almost like throwing a message in a bottle, only more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I don't know if it's ever going to get anywhere. Like, you used to do that in school too. Like, did you ever do, like, I guess you can't do this anymore because of the environment, but like, you would tie a postcard to a balloon and release it and see if you ever got the postcard back.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Stuff like that's really cool.
Alternate reality games, that's what they're called.
Yeah, but they used to just be called games.
Yes. Yeah, I know. I'm just looking real quick. I Love Bees was a promotion for Halo 2.
Mm-hmm.
There have been others.
Yeah, there have, like, when you get into video game marketing, there have been a lot of very interesting and some very ill-fated alternate
some of those have not
games.
worked very well.
Yeah, there was one that involved them scattering zombie parts around London. Well, what amounted to body parts around London. The replica body parts, obviously, but some of them had used, like, chicken blood or something, and not all the parts turned up in the end. And they had to release a statement saying, listen, if you found what appears to be a human arm drenched in blood, don't lick it, because that chicken blood can actually make you sick if it's rotted for a little while or something. It's like, it's a little bit of an awkward statement for a company to have to release.
In 1996, Wizards of the Coast launched a proto-alternate reality game called Webrunner: The Hidden Agenda to promote their game Netrunner. It cast players as hackers through 7 puzzle-themed gates to get the secret data.
Huh.
The popular game was the first online game tied into a product release, making the front page of the New York Times technology section.
Huh. Oh, that's interesting. I guess that was back when Wizards of the Coast was A, still creative, and B, could actually manage to do something online without screwing it up.
Right.
Ooh, I'm sorry. I take that. We're supposed to be happy in this episode, aren't we?
Yeah, Majestic is the one I think I was thinking about. Yeah. Electronic Arts Majestic began development in 1999, featuring phone calls, emails, and other media that involved players in a multi-platform narrative. It was eventually canceled.
Well, it is Electronic Arts. They're going to kill it eventually.
Due to a lack of players.
Oh. Did you ever play... Oh, I don't even remember when this was and how I got involved in it. But did you ever play a game called The Stone?
I don't think so, no.
The Stone was a fascinating game. It was mostly... It was played through basically it was played through your web browser. You got a membership to it. And what it was a collection of visual riddles where you would basically just be presented with a text box to type the answer and a collage of different pictures or some symbols or like a historical painting or with several odd details on it. And the idea was that you were supposed to look in these riddles for elements that you recognized and go to a search engine and look up information and try from the different elements in the picture to tease out the idea that tied them all together. And I can't even remember any of the puzzles in it. But or the answers, so I can't really even give a good example. The Stone online game. Here we go. Puzzles of the Stone are located, in a place called the Immediate. This is the Stone Championship.
There's actually a famous sort of treasure hunt thing. Sometimes people will bury things somewhere and then announce there's a treasure hunt on, and then give you some clues. Mm-hmm. One of the most famous is based on a book called Masquerade.
Okay.
Which was written and illustrated by Kit Williams. The idea is that there are clues to the location of the treasure in the art of the book. And they are not easy to find, but they do lead to a lot of possible solutions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But this one has such an amazing story behind it. It's worth looking up because it went unclaimed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
The book was published in 1979, and it was 1982 before somebody even hinted at having the right answer.
Okay.
All right. But then there's a whole backstory about how the person who had the answer may not have actually had the answer. They may have been fed the answer.
Oh.
To get this thing over with. Because it turns out that the person who eventually claimed the treasure had some years before actually lived with Kit Williams.
No kidding.
Yeah, and there's a whole thing, and then there was a video game released and with a similar theme on the whole, and again there's another hidden treasure and blah blah blah. Okay?
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting story to read through and check out if you're interested in that. There will be links in the show notes.
So, actually I have two things to say to that.
Okay.
Sorry. First of all, I just managed to turn up a website that has maintained a collection of several of the puzzles from the Stone.
Oh, nice.
And there will be a link in the show notes. I think I just supplied you with the link. And I'm looking at one of the puzzles, which just to describe what it is. So you get this visual image, and it's got four items on it. There is a goat, a devil head, a newspaper clipping that says Soto for mayor, and what appears to be a map of an island. And the answer to this is Chupacabra. And I distinctly remember this puzzle because it was the first one I solved, and I'm like, I am addicted to this now. And the reason, like, obviously, Chupacabra was the goat sucker, right? It is a demonic creature that supposedly feeds on goats, dismembers and drinks the blood of goats, and sometimes attacks children. But the rest of the story is that the Chupacabra was actually a known hoax that was invented by a mayor of Puerto Rico. And it was Mayor Soto. And the little island nation that you see in silhouette there is actually Puerto Rico. And if you mouse over it, you get a highlight of the capital city there, just where it is. So by looking for the name of Soto and goat and maybe recognizing the map of Puerto Rico, you put all of this together into the story of the Chupacabra.
Okay.
And if I could spell it correctly, I could put in the answer. Actually, that might not be the answer.
Uh-oh.
It says it's not quite the answer. It is related to that. That much I remember. But you can actually go on here, and if you go to that little demo puzzle site, there's, I think, a combination of maybe what looks like 4 times 4, 16 puzzles there that you can toy with. And they're really cool. But this actually, where you were just talking about, did you ever hear of the Sword Quest contest?
The Sword Quest? No, I don't think so.
So, this is going back a ways. Atari 2600. Okay, they released a series of 4 games, I think in the span of 2 years. Each one was tied to a different element. There was Sword Quest Earthworld, Waterworld, Fireworld, and Airworld. Okay? And what was neat about these games is, it's obviously Atari, so you had to use imagination to see what you were seeing. But what you would do is you would basically wander around this labyrinth. And periodically in the labyrinth, you would walk into a puzzle room where you would have to complete some kind of puzzle or mini game, like a block breaker thing, or crossing, like a Frogger type cross a river type thing. And when you did, you got a page reference, and the page reference referred to the comic book that came with the game. And on that particular page, there would be a word hidden in the art of the comic. So the idea was you had to go through, you find all the puzzle rooms in the labyrinth, get each of the words, write them down, and then organize the words into a passphrase. Some kind of, phrase that would... And not all the words were used. So you also had to recognize that some of the words were red herrings. You then took this and you sent it into Atari. And Atari had 4 prizes, one for each game. Okay? And these were substantial prizes. One of them was a literal jewel-encrusted, golden-hilted sword. Another was a ruby and I think it was platinum. A ruby and platinum goblet. Another one was a crown. And again, these are literally made out of precious metals and gemstones. Okay, they were worth a fortune each.
Right.
And then the 4th one was basically a golden and jewel case that has the Philosopher's Stone in it. And, it was released. There was a whole lot of excitement and fanfare about the whole thing. And the first contest was won, and I think someone ended up with the goblet. And then the second contest, and someone ended up with the crown. And then the video game crash happened. The great video game crash of 82, 83. And Atari was going belly up. And they had already had the prizes manufactured. But everybody had stopped buying the games. And supposedly, the last 2 prizes, which I believe were the sword and the philosopher... No, not the... Yeah, I think it was the sword and the Philosopher's Stone, ultimately went missing.
Huh.
and they're like literal holy grails of the of like the video game industry now. Like, I think there was a story that like one of the presidents of Atari or Activision or whatever ended up with the sword displayed in his office. And I don't remember if there was ever anything of what became of the Philosopher's Stone. The Angry Video Game Nerd actually did a video of the write up or of the story. I'll give you a link so that you can watch that if you want. I'll give you the link and then you can put it in the show notes.
Okay.
Just a warning with the Angry Video Game Nerd: absolutely not safe for work. He did a really good expose on the whole thing. So, and the prizes were fantastic.
You know what geocaching is, right?
Yes, sir, I do.
That's always kind of interesting. I did a little bit of that for a little while.
Did you really?
Yeah. It's so, as you are aware, it's basically.
I'm sorry. I just realized I'm supposed to say no to be the cabbage head.
Yes, you have to be the cabbage head. But no, the thing is, you go out into the outside area of your, wherever it is you live, the part not in your house.
Yeah, the part lit by the horrible day star.
That's right. And you hide a little, I don't know, what do you want to call it? A little container, of stuff, or if you want to keep it really simple, you just put like a notepad and a pencil in there, and you hide this somewhere in where the general public can get to, and then you make a note of the GPS coordinates,
like the longitude and the latitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Longitude, latitude, whatever. And the thing to do is to go on a geocaching website, and that's sort of how you announce that you have hidden a package for people to find, and where you put in your clues, so people get these clues to where to go looking,
Huh.
And then other people come along with their GPS receivers and they try to track it down. And then when they find it, they are allowed, if you've put some extra stuff in there, they're allowed to take something out, but they also have to put something in.
Oh, so the container stays there for other people to find.
Yes, the container stays there for other people to find with a constantly changing batch of contents.
That's really cool.
That is really cool. And then you sign and date the little notebook in there, the logbook, with, just say, okay, so-and-so was here, blah, blah, blah. And then you go back to the geocaching website after you found one of these caches and, type in your name and all that and say, I found this one. And then you can track how many you found and all that kind of stuff.
Right now, I am so grateful that you keep such good show notes, because I know that if I go onto the show notes tomorrow or 2 weeks from tomorrow,
right,
I will be able to find an address of a geocaching website and do this.
Yep. Yes, you will.
I actually want to try this out. I'm going to have a geocaching adventure.
And most people's cell phones are now totally capable of providing sufficient GPS coordinates to make this all work.
That is really cool.
Yep. I think there's even a geocaching app you can download so that when you're standing there looking at whatever it is that you've found, you can just tap it in and say, okay, I found this. Here we are. It's a lot of fun, actually.
Mm-hmm.
If I would do it more if I wasn't doing it by myself and hadn't found most of the ones in the area already.
Mm-hmm.
But they get hidden in all kinds of neat places. Like I've seen some that are like little film canisters, like 35 millimeter film canisters.
Yeah.
That had the cap attached to the underside of a fence post cap, like you have on chain link fences.
Mm-hmm.
So it's secured to that, and then the whole thing is put down the fence post, the pipe, basically, and secured in place. That's a hiding spot.
Oh, that's cool.
And then there are clues to tell you how to find it or where to find it. And I've seen some that are like Tupperware buckets, little pails, or what do I want to say? Like the sandwich size Tupperware containers.
Containers.
Yeah.
They don't have a
That have
special
been-
name.
No, I know. That have been tucked in under old logs or whatever out in the woodsy areas and whatnot.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Parks are good locations. You have to one of the requirements is that it be on public property, so you can't you can't entice people to trespass.
So basically,
Essentially.
if a Pokemon can appear there, it can be a location.
Sure. If you're operating under the assumption that the Pokemon are in fact appearing in locations where they are allowed to appear.
Well, wait a did Pokemon Go actually? Am I thinking of something else? Pokemon Go got into trouble, didn't they? Because some of their Pokemon were appearing in like the yards of people and
People's backyards.
Yeah.
Yes. My local Pokemon, the tower thing where you were supposed to defend or
the gym.
attack for control or whatever. Yeah, the gym.
Yeah, Pokemon
okay.
Gym.
The local one was when Pokemon Go first started was at our airport.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, and not like out in front of the airport. Like pretty much where the control tower was.
Oh, that I guess I'm not sure if that's better or worse than having to clear security to go catch Jigglypuff.
Yeah,
Make sure you get there 2 hours before your gym battle.
that's right.
Are they all from ambassadors?
Yes,
Oh.
that's all we have is ambassadors.
Well,
Everybody's an ambassador.
I'm kind of wondering if people have not misunderstood the ambassador thing and they're all just claiming to be ambassadors now. Because the ambassador was a title that we gave to a very specific group of people who were the people who started listening to the show before it was a show.
Right.
But I don't want to take away the ambassadorship
No,
from anybody.
no.
But at the same time, I still feel that we need to honor those people who found their way to the website and started downloading the episodes before we made it a show.
Okay, so that's something to think about. But the reason we have so many ambassadors now is because I keep calling them ambassadors. They aren't naming themselves.
Oh, okay. So everybody now assumes that all of our fans are just ambassadors.
Sure. And, well, particularly if you write into the show
Okay.
in some form. If you email or you make a comment on the website and we pull it onto the show, then you sort of automatically become an ambassador.
Okay.
So maybe what we need to do is find a slightly stronger term for those people who were there before we were there.
We'll have to think about it. If you formerly were an ambassador who now feels that your ambassadorship is threatened by the fact that has become such a general name, leave us some feedback with an alternate title.
Right. Do that.
Yeah.
We will prioritize
This is
that.
of concern to you.
Yeah. We'll prioritize that. Ambassador Tyler emailed us to say, I think it's safe to say you two both like systems, so this question doesn't directly apply to you in some ways. Do you think that with an established group that has learned how to work with each other as players to operate the world of their characters, is a game system strictly necessary?
Yes?
Okay. Would you care to expand on that in a useful way?
I don't know how useful it will be. Useful has never been a criteria for anything that ends up in this show, but...
True.
Well, it depends. Like, obviously, it depends on what the goal is. If the goal is to tell a story, then no, you don't need a system. Okay? But if there is going to be an element of chance, uncertainty, and challenge, that goes beyond merely, I can't even say, not even goes beyond merely. If there's going to be an element of chance, uncertainty, and challenge, which are the parts of a role-playing game that make it a game, And also the fact that there is an opportunity to succeed, an opportunity to fail, and choices you can make that tip your odds one way or the other towards success or failure, then there's going to be some way to resolve that. Okay? That said, the word system doesn't have to mean pages and pages and pages of rules and dice and whatever. There is a very, very simple system in a role-playing game called Panty Explosion Perfect, which is not nearly what it sounds like, which basically amounts to each character or each player at the table has one player that is considered to be their best friend and one player that is considered to be their rival. And the narrator creates a challenge or an obstacle scene, and your best friend and your rival narrate the outcomes in different ways. But it's a very, very simple system that's just based on the two people at the game, one who's gunning for you and one who's gunning after, or gunning for you is going against you. One who's gunning for you and one who wants to see you win, narrating the potential outcomes for you depending on the situation. And that's a system too. A system doesn't have to be complicated. And then honestly, even something as simple as like the Exquisite Corpse, the game where everybody just adds a little bit more to an ongoing story. That's a system. You're taking turns. There's rules for who can add stuff to the story. So without a system, even storytelling would just devolve into people babbling.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a game just recently republished by FFG, which is The Adventures of Baron Munchausen.
That was republished?
Yeah, in a very nice hardbacked edition too, by the way.
No kidding.
No kidding.
I'm sorry, I just totally you got me excited now. Are we on the show? Because I don't care. I got to go check this out.
No, yeah, but the idea behind it is that if you've never seen Baron Munchausen or read Baron Munchausen, he tells these tales that are
or suffered the syndrome.
Yes, or suffers the syndrome, by which the stories he tells are completely incredible and nigh unbelievable, but he will insist they are absolutely true. And so the idea of this game is that you get your friends to sit around a table, you buy a round of drinks or whatever. And then somebody turns to somebody else and says, Admiral Scott, please tell me about the time you sailed to North Africa on the back of a whale.
Well, say there, Corporal Fiddle Brian. It certainly didn't start off that way, but let me tell you what happened. And I can't go any further than that.
No.
Sorry.
And so he builds this story. Now what happens is everybody else at the table has a number of coins available to them with which they may challenge any point of his story. So, for example, if he were to say, and then on the whaling ship out of Nantucket, we entered the storm, and somebody could interrupt and say at that point by advancing a coin and say, but it's very clear in Nantucket in March. And so his job is either to take the coin and then incorporate that fact into the story, or reject the coin and pay one of his own so that he doesn't have to use that particular fact. And so everybody tells a story, and then at the end, whoever's got the most coins, and there's like a vote and whatnot, whoever has the most coins has to buy a round of drinks for everybody else. That kind of stuff. But it's just a light game with some light rules to give it a little bit of a challenge. There's no reason you couldn't play it, without that particular little bit of rules. But it just helps to give it a little structure. So I think you could, with an established group that has learned how to work with each other and operate the world, blah, 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 I think you could sit there and tell stories without having a particular system in place other than who gets to start and who can go next. But if you're looking for something more role-playing centered, then I think you're going to give up some of that sort of free form stuff in order to play within the bounds of the rules. I'm looking at the bonus question here.
Yeah, it's hard not to move ahead to it, right?
Because the bonus question is there a particular system that you think has the best balance of rules focus and player freedom for new players or a newly formed group? No?
Yes.
Okay. All right. If I'm forced to pick one, I'm thinking probably one of the apocalypse world systems.
That's what you think would be a good balance of freedom and system for new players.
I think so, but take out the character creation. Just have pre-gens. You don't want to mess with that.
Right.
Because we're talking new players or a newly formed group.
Right.
Because the Apocalypse World systems, which includes Dungeon World and a bunch of other stuff, are very much, here's what I want to do, and then the GM adjudicates a little bit, tells you what to roll. You roll it, and that's the results, which are then narrated. I think it's very straightforward.
Yeah, and it really does. It codifies the conversation that is at the heart of every role-playing game.
Right.
Which I agree with. But there's a bit of there is this voice in the back of my brain that wants to pick apart this whole question and disagree with it on its very premises.
Okay.
First of all, the concept of player freedom is one that people get worked up a lot over.
Right.
And it's not, I don't think it's a phrase that means what people think it means. Okay? There's two directions you can go with player freedom. First of all, there's agency, which is the ability to, within the constraints of the game world, choose whatever action you desire. Right? I mean, that's agency right there. I am in control of my character, and nothing else is. And within whatever the situation is, I can do whatever that character could do in that situation, or at least try to. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the concept of narrative control, where it's like the player can actually create aspects of the world. Like I can change the scene, or I can add characters or NPCs or whatever. And that's what I would call narrative control. Okay? The former, player agency, is an aspect of every game that has a game master. And that's precisely why the game master exists. So that there is a human being that can adjudicate whatever actions any person can possibly think of and figure out a way to resolve it within or outside of the system, or invent new parts to the system as the need be. So in that respect, any system run properly will do that. In terms of narrative control, I don't think that's something that new players want or need, because it exposes you very much to a blank slate problem. There's an adage that goes, never let the players create both the problem and the solution. You either ask them to create, you tell them this problem was solved like this, now narrate how what the problem was or whatever. There's really actually not a good way to go backwards. No. Okay, so never let the players create both the problem and the solution. So, they are presented with a problem that comes from the world, an external problem, and they solve the problem with their characters. You know, and giving any sort of narrative control to new players who are just trying to wrap their minds around the basic concept of, okay, you're a character in this world. You know, that's, yeah, I think that's sort of dangerous for new players. Especially because it's very natural. The idea of role-playing itself is kind of a natural idea. You're a character in the world is something you can understand. Here's the world. You're the person in it. Make the decisions that you think that character would make. I'll handle the rules, you know, as the GM. Is something very easy to... That's like lesson one for a role-playing game. And any game can handle that. And going beyond that to say, okay, let's invent the world and then tell a story in it. That's a lot more abstract. And it's going to throw a lot more new players off. So as far as what particular system, I would say, pick any one. Any role-playing game. Yeah, some are more complicated than others. But hell, at 10 years old, I taught myself how to play AD&D 2nd Edition. Okay, I had no one to teach me. I taught myself and 4 of my friends how to play it. Okay? New players are smarter than we think they are. And there is sort of even a little bit of, I don't know, like there's an arrogance in role players that we think what we do is so complicated that we need to dumb it down for new people. We can't start them on the real systems until they've played, you know, something easy. We'll start them on... We'll put a box set of the rules together that's just, you know, like simplified and easy for people to learn, because they couldn't learn all these complicated rules. You know? So, yeah. What was the question?
Right.
Did I answer any of it?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. I'm willing to pretend you did.
Okay, I got lost somewhere.
That's fine.
As happens to me.
Ambassador Jeff also wrote in by email. This isn't really a question, I guess, so much as it is an opportunity for me to fill in Ambassador Jeff on a couple of small things. He wrote in to ask if either of us had played the Fallout computer games, which offers the special system for ability scores. So, strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck. Right? So, yes or no? Have you played the Fallout computer games, which has the special system?
I have indeed.
Okay, as have I. That was settled. Now, this is the part I wanted to comment on.
Okay.
He says, I feel like there was a tabletop RPG for Fallout that used these as its ability scores. You're correct, sir. There was. It wasn't official by any stretch of the imagination. And it only included Fallouts 1, 2, 3, and Tactics. Wait, was 3 still a 3/4 overhead?
No, 3 was...
No, so
3
it was 1, 2...
after the switch to first person.
Right, so it only covered 1, 2, and Fallout Tactics.
And Tactics, yeah.
Yeah. It was an okay system. Its chief Fallout, its chief fall down was the fact that it precisely emulated the game engine.
Oh.
Yeah. Now you see why that's a problem. There was a lot of math involved in doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
You would literally we had to print out formulas so that people, when they were running their characters, could plug in the numbers they needed to plug in, and then strongly hope that none of them changed during the combat. Okay, and it was calculators. It was calculators the whole way. So it was, yeah, okay. It was a Fallout RPG, but it was way more complicated than I or anybody I hung out with really wanted to play once we dug into it. Now, having said that, what I want you to do is pay close attention to 2 companies: Fantasy Flight Games and Modifius Entertainment. because both of them have gotten licenses to produce Fallout games. One is a miniatures game, and one is a miniatures board game. Now, I know you're not going to know what the difference is between those, and frankly, I don't think anybody else does either.
One of them doesn't have a board?
Yeah, one doesn't have a board. That's really all there is to it. But both of these companies have permission, it would seem, to make Fallout games. And it's a short step from either miniatures or board games to a Fallout RPG.
How?
And I'm going to point out that FFG has just released the Genesis system.
Which would lend itself very well to a Fallout system, honestly.
Yes, it would.
Huh. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
I mean, what fascinates me most about this, because I had no idea about any of this, to be honest.
Right.
What fascinates me most about this, though, is that two different companies have what is apparently very similar or the same rights to a franchise.
Right.
It is very unusual for like two, like for overlapping rights like that. Like a role-playing game and a board game is one thing, and even that's kind of hairy. But to give two people the role-playing game rights or the board game rights,
yeah,
on the nitpicky difference between a board game and a war game.
And even more interesting is that both companies announced their games pretty much right on top of each other.
Huh.
So they'd had them for a while.
Something must have been screwed up there. Like two different people at the company signed contracts, and then neither one wanted to be scooped by the other one. So they, as soon as one found out they were announcing, the other one decided they had to announce on the same day.
Yeah. It's weird. I don't understand it myself, but there you go.
Oh, that's so weird.
Ambassador Eric, again, via email, that's digressionsanddragons@gmail.com.
Very nicely worked in there.
Yeah, wrote in to disagree with you, sir.
He's wrong.
Yeah, well, okay. He says, I have to disagree with Angry's assessment of Michelle Pfeiffer. She seemed to be an aging 1920s flapper, which ran very much counter to the social norms of the era. She did not fit the times because she was actually a decade and a half further back than the rest.
I had an opinion about Michelle Pfeiffer?
You did.
Can I have context? Judges,
yes,
context?
Yes, you may. Murder on the Orient Express.
Oh, Murder on the... Okay. All right. Your disagreement has been noted. You're wrong. I'm not complaining that she was off a decade and a half in the past. I'm complaining she didn't go far enough back. She still seemed like she was playing at best a 1950s 1940s or 1950s hip cat.
Okay. That's
all there is to say about that, really.
That's all there is. He would also like to recommend to you, after you finished your read through of the Orient Express, the ABC
which is on the pile.
Yeah, the ABC Murders and Death on the Nile. I would agree with that. Those are two very good ones.
Though I have been told that I might not like the style of Agatha Christie so much because... we have had exactly that conversation. See previous episode.
Hello.
Whichever episode it was. Never mind. You're the one who told me that.
Yes, I am the one who told you that. Ambassador Leland commented on the website for the episode in which we talked about supplements that were worth it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, regarding Trove of Treasure Maps, the earliest example of the form I'm aware of was the Judges Guild product, The Book of Treasure Maps by Paul, a name I'm going to mispronounce no matter what I try, from 1979. During the transitional period between D&D and AD&D.
Wow, you didn't even try on the name.
No, because I look at that and I see Paul Jacques, Paul Jacques, Paul, whatever. It has 5, with apologies to Polly J. It has 5 treasure maps and accompanying adventures ranging in size from a sort of well to a couple of largish dungeons and one large castle manor complex full of characters. One map is a magic shield that mirrors the phases of the moon. One is the form of a letter from an adventurer to his brother. One is a ripped page from a chronicle, and so on.
I feel like I've seen this. I think my library had a copy of... Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. It would be a weird thing for the library to have.
That would be a weird thing for the library to have.
Yeah.
Although some libraries are getting better about that sort of thing. Not systems that old, but...
Well, once upon a time, libraries were actually good about this sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, and this is the time period that I'm talking about.
Leland would also like to mention that Philip K. Dick and Arthur C. Clarke and concepts versus their realization in movie form. He says, Clarke especially is what I think of as a big idea author. He comes up with some idea. What if powerful, benevolent aliens happen to look like devils? What if humans learned the sun was going to go nova? And kind of explores that space for a while. But often there's not a compelling through line that screams, make me into a movie. A lot of the time, short stories are better fodder for adaptation into movies than are novels.
I agree with all of that.
Noted and accepted, Leland. Yeah, no, you're right, though. Clarke is big ideas and explore the space and that kind of stuff. Yes.
And more generally, novels have too much in them for movies. And
Right.
Short stories are usually better. It's easier to expand a short story than it is to chop up a novel.
Ambassador Bill wanted to point out the discussion of goods and gear, particularly the effects of large sums of coinage landing in small economies, made him remember Emily Dresner Thornbur's Dungeonomics articles. He says, I get that what we're playing is fantasy games, but sometimes it's fun to ponder how you can defeat a dungeon just by making the evil lich default on his construction loans, or why all high-level wizards end up being sheep farmers after they retire, because vellum is expensive and raising sheep to get it is a lot less dangerous than bending basic laws of physics while fighting giant dragons.
While fighting dragons.
Yes, while fighting dragons. He's right. We've taken a look at it, and it is an amusing series of articles about how the economics of actually adventuring are pretty hard.
Well, what it really seems to be is, okay, let's take some basic economic fact, mix it into the D&D world, and then try to draw the funniest conclusion we can from that.
There you go.
Which I am saying that with respect. Very amusing concepts.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it combines economics and Dungeons and Dragons, two things I love very much, though
Right.
not always something that I want mixed together. This is funny, and this is obviously played for laughs, right? But people do talk about the economies of role-playing games like that's a thing. And one of the issues to remember is that Dungeons and Dragons does not have an economy.
Right.
Okay, in an economy, when a player when someone goes to buy something, the store owner gets the money, and then the store owner uses that money to buy goods they need, or to buy supplies, or to buy new goods that they can sell, or whatever, and then that moves through the economy, and yada yada yada, whatever. In D&D, when you buy something, you erase the money and have the thing. The money doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't do anything. Money is really just another form of experience points. It's just another thing you can do to modify your character. Or at least it would be if there was a use for money in D&D.
Yeah. They didn't really do much with that, did they?
No. Well, again,
Not in this latest one, anyway.
Well, I think the biggest problem with it is precisely that they don't want to use it as advancement, as an alternative advancement system to experience points. I don't know why I pronounce the X in experience points so pronouncedly.
Because it's XP.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to say XP and then aborting and saying the whole word. Okay, but anyway, I think they wanted to get away from that because therein lies the treasure tables and wealth by character level that D&D 3.5 had and Pathfinder has. But by the same token, if you take that out, then there really isn't a use for money other than money sinks, which is basically every so often you just have to evaporate the player's money. And those aren't satisfying. Adventurers gather this money not because they like to gather money, but because they genuinely want to do things with it. They would like to buy new equipment. They would like to upgrade their armor, upgrade their weapons, buy magical equipment, prepare themselves for the next adventure, finance expeditions, buy a ship, and yada, yada, yada. And very little of that is now offered because we had to get away from that. Because GMs basically didn't want to do a whole lot of work. GMs are lazy, and the designers at Wizards of the Coast listen to them too much. So that's my assessment. Anyway.
Ambassador Jolly Red Giant raised a point that I think we might want to clarify. I'm not sure. Anyway, over on the website, he was talking about our Xanathar's Guide to Everything discussion. Mm-hmm. He says, we appear to have actually contradicted ourselves. Mm-hmm. We complained about, one of our complaints about Xanathar's Guide is there's too much essential stuff in this book. Traps, tool proficiencies, etc. And yet another complaint was that there's too much non-essential stuff in this book. Class options, spells, etc. Mm-hmm. He finds that to be contradictory, and I think I explained at some point, or one of us explained at some point, that it's not that there's too much essential stuff in this book. It's that this is essential stuff that should have been in the player's handbooks or Dungeon Master Guide. Mm-hmm. That's how essential it was. Right. It's more that it's misplaced rather than that that there is too much essential stuff in the book.
Well, I will also like to defend the fact that even if both of those complaints are exactly what we said, and I'll even cop to it, I will say there was too much stuff in the book that was core stuff, and there was also too much stuff in the book that was fluffy garbage. Okay? Those can both be true. What that means is that you have a book that is half required reading and half padded. So,
Okay.
However, is this a supplement? Well, if it's a supplement, then it should all be non-essential stuff. Is this a core rulebook? Then it should all be essential stuff. Mixing and matching means they're failing at both. Okay? Whose dollar are they after? And what am I supposed to do with this book? So I will say that even if we said those things, and I'll even say, yeah, I agree. Both of those things are bad things about Xanathar's Guide to Things, whatever the book was called.
Right.
I still say that that's not actually a contradiction. And you know what? Even if it is a contradiction, I still stand by both statements.
Okay. Meanwhile, Ambassador Quester, who also wrote into the website, says he thinks that Xanathar's Guide is suffering from the PHP +1 book rule that they are pushing forward for Adventurers Guild character creation as a means of reducing the perceived cost of entry. I'm a little confused by this.
Oh, okay. I actually understand that.
You understand this. Okay. Explain it to me like I don't.
Okay. Basically, the Adventurers Guild has a rule that when you are creating a character, you are supposed to limit every choice you make for that character to things that can only be found in the player's handbook or one other book of your choice. So you cannot assemble a character from 10 different books. Okay, you have to draw all of your options from precisely 2 books, one of which must be the player's handbook, one of which can be a book of your choosing. I don't agree with Questor saying that, because number one, there really aren't that many supplements out there that give players options that are published books. And I don't know how they count, like, well, I know when they come out with the, like, the Curse of Strahd and the other adventures, the Adventurers League also puts forth a player's supplement with some player options that are specific to that adventure. So I don't know if that counts as your one book. Maybe it does. But the other thing is, I don't think Wizards is that clever. Because the implication here is that they realize, oh, we have this one player's handbook plus one book rule. So what we really need to do is come out with a book that compiles all of these different options so that we can do that. You know, I don't think they thought it through that much. I think they thought it through as we have to put out a book. We have all these character classes that we've invented through Unearthed Arcana, and people keep saying, are those ever going to actually be published in anything? Have you finished playtesting them? What's what? We have to put them out, and damn it, they don't fill a book. Well, we're going to have to fill the rest of that.
Yeah.
I honestly think that was the thought process behind Xanathar's. Was, well, we have these class options, that's a third of a book. What else we got? We could invent spells. Jeremy likes making random tables. We can put more of those in.
I guess if you were going to be forced to select a player's handbook plus one book, then I suppose Xanathar's is the natural choice.
Yeah, it would certainly be the most economic choice.
Right.
See, I have a one book rule. It's called the player's handbook.
Mm-hmm. That's the same rule I have.
It's good enough.
Unless I have some very good reasons for wanting other stuff in, nothing gets in that isn't player's handbook.
Right? In our Dragon Quest discussions,
right,
you brought up something that actually got my wheels spinning a couple of weeks ago.
Did I?
Yeah, though admittedly, I really don't know too much about it other than having seen a chart in a strategy guide. So okay. You might actually be able to help fill some stuff in here.
Oh, you're calling upon my Dragon Quest expertise.
Yeah.
Okay, pretend I have some. Go on.
Dragon Quest 6 and 7.
Uh-huh.
With their job system or their class system.
Right.
They seem to do something very interesting involving leveling up in multiple classes to basically obtain a more advanced class. Like, for example, leveling up in both fighter and cleric to become a paladin.
Right.
Do I have that basic understanding correct?
You have the basic understanding correct, yes.
Okay. So, because I was recently having a discussion with some people about multi-classing. Mm-hmm. And why I despise multi-classing.
Okay.
Okay. And my issue with multi-classing in D&D, particularly in D&D, but I guess in any game that really allows it, is that from a story and world perspective, it really strains it strains my brain, to be totally honest. So, like, I mean...
How so?
Okay, so, in theory, when you're a first level adventurer, you have spent several years training at all of the different things that add up to your class, right? So, for example, if you're a wizard, presumably there have been many years of, attending Hogwarts and doing homework and studying to the point where you have mastered the very basics of magic well enough that you can now go out and continue learning on your own, right?
That seems to be the theory, yes.
Right, and this takes years of study. And in fact, there are some editions of D&D, and specifically 3rd edition, honestly, codified exactly how many years of study it took. Because your starting age as an adventurer varied depending on the class you were. So if you were a sorcerer, because sorcerers are generally learning how to simply master innate abilities, or basically control innate abilities enough not to blow themselves apart, you would start off as like 15 plus 1d4 years old. Whereas, I think that was it. I'm going by memory here. Whereas if you were a wizard, or a cleric or something that involved a great deal of training, it was like 15 plus a d8 or something like, or 2d4 or something like that. So you were innately older than other characters because you had to spend many more years in training. Right? And that all makes perfect sense. Even being a fighter is a very, very complex thing to learn. They are masters of combat. They're trained in many, many different weapons, which I love also how trivial it is in D&D to be trained in so many different weapons. Like, oh yeah, I know how to use everything. But whatever. Okay. So now we take this fighter who, 18 years old, fresh-faced, he has graduated after, several years of being someone's squire, let's say. Right? So he gains 3 or 4 levels in fighter, and then all of a sudden he decides he wants to take a level of wizard, right? So within the span of leveling up, over the course of a single night, he masters the magic that it took the wizard in the party years and years to master. Right?
Yeah, okay, I get you.
Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, Order of the Stick even made a joke about this one, because I think the bard, Elan, he decided he was going to multi-class into wizard, and the wizard was furious, because the wizard had spent her entire life, or his entire life, because the wizard was gender ambiguous, if I remember correctly, Varsuvius. Varsuvius had spent their entire life obtaining a mastery of even the simplest magics, and Elan was just through the magic of paperwork suddenly becoming a wizard. And but I mean, that drives me crazy, because in my world, and I don't mean in the Angryverse, I mean in the world of my head, your class is something more than just a pile of abilities. It represents something in the world. A cleric is not just, oh, I decided to be a cleric, or whatever. It's not just a list of spells you can cast. It represents a connection to a god and faith and all of that stuff, and devotion. So it's not the sort of thing that just happens in a single stroke of spending experience points. And I have never ever liked the argument, well, we'll just retroactively assume that I've been studying magic this whole time, because it would actually be more interesting to have that feature in the game somehow. Because there are interesting stories that could be told there. So, long story short is, I hate multi-classing. To the point where I'm starting a new campaign next month. Or actually, I guess, in 2 weeks. Right, in 2 weeks. So I'm starting a new campaign in 2 weeks. And I had my session 0 with the players. And one of the things I asked them outright, and it's something that I ask a lot, because they ask, well, what level are we starting at? And to me, that's a stupid question, because the first level is level 1. That's why it's called level 1. That's where you start. I don't understand why that's a question. Except that I do occasionally start at level 2. And I will start at level 2 if there is anybody in the group that is so married to multi-classing that I can't guilt them out of it. Because my rule for multi-classing is, if you want to be multi-classed, you got to start multi-classed. Okay, you have to have had enough time to develop both of those things. Okay, so I will literally start my campaign a level ahead, just so that multi-classing doesn't break my brain. Now, I know you're wondering how all of this comes back to Dragon Quest, right?
Yes, that is exactly the thought that is on my mind.
I assume there's more swears when you think it, though.
Yeah, possibly.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? One of the big problems with multi-classing in D&D in general is that it is always an afterthought. they never design around the concept of multi-classing. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, we design the classes, and then, well, we have to figure out how to allow multi-classing. So this starts the germ of an idea in my head of, if I were designing a role-playing game,
Yes.
what
Which you
would
clearly aren't.
Which I clearly am not. Well, I have to be careful making that joke because some of these thoughts are really thoughts that would never find their way into my role-playing game that I was designing, because many of them are just fixing D&D.
Right.
And I would not start from broken. So, but in this case, so if I were designing a role-playing game, one of the things that the first thought that I had is, well, I would design each class to have separate advancement tracks. One for normal advancement and one for being used as multi-class.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they would be partial advancement things. So if you're multi-class, at each level, when you level up, let's say you're a fighter thief, you partially level up as both a fighter and a thief. There's no, I'm a level 3 thief, level 2 fighter. You're a level 2 character, and there is this partial advancement table. But then I realized that that's a little bit too complicated. Instead, you could actually, because this is the thing, like it becomes an aspect of taking things away, right? Where if you're advancing as multi-class, what I'm really saying is these are the benefits you don't get. So instead, I suddenly become of the opinion, well, what if instead of having 2 separate advancement tracks, every class has a normal advancement track, and when you multi-class, you can combine those advancement tracks freely, and they're designed to combine freely, but periodically at certain levels, you get bonuses for specializing in a single class. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Right.
So as a fighter, when you hit level 3, you might get a special neat thing that only fighters who are single-class fighters get. Whereas if you're a fighter thief, well, you have both the fighter and the thiefness, and that's cool, but you're not the specialist fighter. Likewise, the thief has some neat benefit that they get at this level that is just not going to be handed out to people who've divided their study. And in so doing, you have basically now created divided advancement tracks, but instead of calling it a divided advancement track, what you're really doing is giving someone a bonus for not multi-classing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then, while these thoughts happened to be rattling around in my head, along came you talking about Dragon Quest again. And I realized that if you already plant that idea of multi-classing with, special benefits at certain periodic levels for single-class characters only, could you not also then plant benefits for certain multi-class combinations? Could you, so if you're level 3 and you're just a straight-up fighter, you get a special ability that is only for fighters as a reward for your specialization. But if you are a fighter cleric, at level 3 there is a special ability unique to fighter clerics that you get instead of that specialist fighter ability. And if you do that, you can suddenly create a whole bunch of classes that are no longer classes because they're just multi-class combinations. Suddenly the paladin doesn't have to be a separate class. The paladin is just those bonuses that fighter clerics get. I got very excited about this. I'm sorry.
No, I'm with you. I'm just thinking it through.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that Dragon Quest does, particularly Dragon Quest VII,
mm-hmm.
In addition to your basic classes, and then you combine 2, you get an advanced class.
Right.
There are also master classes, which combine 2 or more advanced classes. If you level up mage and priest sufficiently,
mm-hmm.
and each of those has 8 levels, and you have to do them, you can't do both at the same time. You start with one and then go to the other.
Okay.
If you level up mage and priest, then your advanced class is sage.
Okay, yeah.
All right? But if you level up warrior and martial artist, your advanced class is gladiator.
Okay.
All right.
I would have guessed samurai, but fine.
Sure, whatever. And I've probably picked two examples that don't have a master, but right. Anyway, so there are three master classes. There's champion, druid, and hero. Okay, don't ask me why. That's just the names.
Right.
But okay, so you take gladiator, which is fighter and martial artist. And you take paladin, which is cleric and fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You combine those two, you can be a champion.
Right.
Sage and what they call a luminary, which is actually three basic classes in one. It's the jester, the troubadour, and the something else I can't remember. Dancer, troubadour, and jester. That's what it is.
Okay.
So you can become a luminary with those three. If you've mastered those three, you become a luminary. You combine that with sage, and you can be a druid.
Okay.
What ends up happening, at least in Dragon Quest VII, is there are 50 different classes.
Which seems a little excessive.
It does seem like a lot. but you have to account for the various combinations of basic classes.
Right.
Then the various combinations of advanced classes. Although not all combinations of advanced classes lead somewhere, some of them just stop at being advanced.
Yeah, I actually pulled open my Dragon Warrior 7 strategy guide here to actually look at the classes. So this is 7 though. This isn't 6.
Right. This is 7.
Yeah.
And then just as a side note, you can also level up in what they call monster classes.
Yeah, I see that table too.
Yeah, that's.
I'm not touching that one.
No, that's a little bit silly. But there you go. But it's interesting that because each class also comes with a stat adjustment. Either up or down. So you have to give up something to get something else every time you change classes.
Right. The big thing that I'm envisioning to start this though, and why like the advanced class idea wouldn't necessarily fit into this, is that you have to commit to the multi-class at character creation.
Right.
Okay. Which I guess makes it sort of similar to like what they called Gestalt characters, which was a rule that I think appeared in 3.5, which was basically how to shave off, basically how to take half levels in 2 classes.
Oh, yeah.
But that whole thing was a system designed to solve a problem that was built into the system by the fact that they didn't think about multi-classing until later on and decided that you could just take class levels. So you had a character level and then your individual classes had levels and they didn't have to be the same. Whereas I don't like that idea to begin with. I think there should be one character level. And if there is going to be a multi-classing, there should be a way to gain one level and gain it in both of your classes.
Right. I have a question, but I don't. I'm putting that question in the show notes for later.
Okay. You think it's the sort of thing that'll explode into an hour?
Yep.
Okay. Fair enough. It'll also be interesting to see if anybody has feedback on this concept. Or if I'm the only one who hates multi-class and they're like, just get over it.
So, here it is. Now, 3 days after Christmas, right?
Right.
And we're going to assume that everybody has gotten gifts that they enjoy. But we did want to take this time to thank you guys out there for listening to 13 episodes of this.
For reasons known only to yourselves.
That's right. And also to wish you a very happy holiday and a pleasing and prosperous new year.
Indeed.
We're not stopping. I know this sounds like the final bow of the entire show. We have big things coming up next year in the new year, and actually, honestly, kind of excited about some of it. So, anyway, thanks for listening. Have a happy holiday.
Thank you to everyone for listening and enjoying this, and also for your feedback, which definitely helps us fill out that middle portion of the show.
Yeah.
Actually, I really do enjoy the feedback. We've had a lot of really good discussions that come from the feedback, and I hope that keeps up. And just in general, right out of the gate, we had people who were really interested in the show, who were really enjoying it. And it's always gratifying to hear people enjoy the things that you like. It makes us want to keep doing it. So, I also hope that your holidays, whatever holidays they might have been, were bright and happy and healthy and filled with love and good cheer and adult beverages. And, I think we're all at this point saying, here's to a better 2018.
Yes. Absolutely.
So.
Must be better. And enjoy what's left of 2017, because I think it's running out of time.